Up to the 30, the 20, 10, 5. Torrey Horton back to the end zone.
48-yard play. Guess who? Body up the middle, making another move to the outside. 15, 10, end zone again.
Keeps it. Nice move by Brown. He's got space. He's got 6. 35-yard touchdown for Byron Brown. A record-setting night for the South Florida quarterback.
Down so far, a little bit of a high snap. Genty right up the middle. Genty has room. Ashton Genty, give him 6.
Second and low. Lagar tries to pin it in. Runnels, it does. Runnels stays up. The Suns offense 4-3 wheels. Incredible effort for Runnels.
The G5 Hive. All G5, all the time.
Welcome to the G5 Hive Live, and we are excited to bring you the G5 college football coverage you love each and every week. I am Luke, and I am proudly joined by my co-host, Justice. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you're watching us on X, please give us a follow, a like, and a retweet. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, please leave a rate and review. And don't forget, the G5 Hive merchandise stores is now live. You can get that down here at the link below if you're watching us on YouTube or X. That'll also be in our YouTube video comments as well as pinned on our X page at the bottom of the screen here.
All right. I'm looking here at what we got live on Twitter, and I'm just not making sense of the math. We've got a whole bunch of people watching and not as many retweets and likes. So if you're watching us on X, please give us a follow, a like, and a retweet. If you're listening to some podcast form here on Tuesday morning, make sure you give us a rate and review. And hopefully the whole YouTube stuff got figured out. I don't know if you still got the warning or not.
Yeah, it's still the warning. So I don't know that it's showing it or not. When I try to watch it, it doesn't look like it's showing it. But once we get done recording, I'll check. If it's not there, I will post the recording up.
All right. And so if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you're listening to us on live, go to our YouTube page. Subscribe there so you can get updates. We've got shorts that come out all the time. So give us a follow. Support us any way you can. Let's look at our waiver wire honey for the week. This week we're switching things up a little bit. Usually we've been giving you about 10 from each position. This is where we switch into our fantasy football aspect. We're just going to pick one quarterback, each of us. We did not share these prior to. One tight end, 2 running backs, and 2 wide receivers.
And it's the playoffs, too, so not a lot of teams looking at it.
Yeah, so we are looking strictly as who can help us in Week 12 in your fantasy matchups. Quarterback-wise, I went with Owen McCown. He's 27% owned. He's a 2020 guy. Big over-under in this game. When I wrote this, the over-under was at 71.5. It's since gone up. Over his last 4 contests, McCown has averaged 37.9 fantasy points, averaging 43 pass attempts, 327 yards passing, and 3 touchdowns per game in that hot streak. In Week 12, the Roadrunners have this date with North Texas, and this might be that 72.5 might now be the highest over-under of the week, with Washington State being second. So I want all pieces of this game. Give me Owen McCown.
I had a hard time picking one. There was 2 I wanted to pick. I wanted to pick Colton Joseph and Caton Hauser.
Oh my gosh, you're such a homer.
I ended up picking Caton Hauser for 2 reasons. Number one, Colton Joseph's ownership's 27%. Caton Hauser's ownership is only at 13%, so he's less owned. And Caton Hauser has some pretty sweet matchups coming up. So as I told you when I talked about him, the player of the week, he has been on fire since getting that starting job. 13 touchdowns in the last 3 weeks. His points over that stretch 28.58, 26.86, and 44.92. Since being named the starter, he had that huge week this week with 6 total touchdowns. Like Luke said, it really should have been 7. But the next 2 weeks, man, he has some really, really good matchups. They have Tulsa and North Texas. Looks like 2 games where there should be a lot of offense, a lot of points, and so for that reason, I did take Caton Hauser as my 1 quarterback pick for the waiver wire this week.
And I was between McCown and Caton Hauser, and I just over-under wise, I took McCown. So I approve of the Hauser pick. Running back wise, I've chosen Aljay Henderson, Buffalo 5% owned, and Damian Taylor, Troy 9% owned. Also, like, I've got 2 things here to talk about Troy, so we'll get into that here second. First, Aljay Henderson, Buffalo 5% owned. Last week, or his last 4 weeks that he's played, he's got 15.8, 24.6, 13.5, and 21.9 points. He's got 142, 97, 81, and 107 yards in those games. He's seen opportunities of 19, 16, 18, and 24 opportunities. Ball State here in week 12. Ball State has led up 100 yards rushing or multi-touchdown games to the running back position in their last 2. Miami of Ohio, we had 22 carries for 105 yards, and then 2 touchdowns from Ontario Brown the week before. I think he had like 60-some yards rushing. Again, this one will be a good one. I think we said Wednesday, I think it was. But I like Aljay Henderson, 5% owned. Those opportunities of 19, 16, 18, 24 still available on your waiver wire is like, that's primo. I mean, it might not feel good to enter him into your lineup because you've made it to the playoffs without him, but I think he's a good guy to have. Damian Taylor, Troy, 9% owned. Damian Taylor is averaging 16 attempts for 88 yards and half a touchdown over his last 4 games. Troy plays the Eagles of Georgia Southern here in week 12. The Eagles have allowed 176 yards rushing and about 1 touchdown on the ground over their last 4 games. We've seen a bit of an uptick here in his usage over the last 2 weeks. This can be attributed to Troy's move at quarterback to Matthew Caldwell. I believe we see a heavy dose of Damian Martinez and Gerald Green here in week 12. Honestly, if Damian Green is rostered in your league, grab Gerald Green. He's also averaging 2 carries less at 14, the same amount of yards, 88, and about half a touchdown a game. So I just give you a 2-for-1. Just get Troy's backfield. You probably can't go wrong this week with either one. They're getting about the same usage. So I kind of gave you 3. I cheated.
So I took a little bit of a different approach with my 2 picks. I gave you one guy that is definitely kind of help now. And then the other guy maybe is a help now, but more of like a dynasty stash in your league. So the help now guy, Eli Sanders, New Mexico. He's 24% owned. He's had back-to-back monster weeks over 30 points, 34.1 and 32 points, 205 yards, 173 yards, and he's had 2 touchdowns each of the last 2 weeks. New Mexico is relying on him and Devin Dampier. The only downside, I guess, for Sanders, if there is a downside, he does have a game in week 12, but he does have a bye in week 13. And then my other pick, more of a dynasty ad, and he could have some value this week as well, especially if we hear Ontario Brown is going to be out. And that's our freshman offensive player of the week, Telly Johnson Jr., Northern Illinois, 3%. Like I said, dynasty stash for next season. Both Ontario Brown and Gavin Williams will be out of eligibility, so it'll be Telly's backfield. This past week, he had 23 carries, 141 yards, and 2 touchdowns in the absence of Ontario Brown, who suffered an injury. But again, dynasty stash, but could help you this week if Antonio Brown is not healthy and ready to play.
All right, wide receivers. Like I said, I like Ken Hauser, so who's going to throw it to? He's going to throw it to Chase Sewell. ECU, 23% rostered. Sewell had 26.8 fantasy points in the switch. In the week that the switch was made at quarterback, Sewell had that season best in targets with 10, receptions and 7, receiving yards 138. He also got his first touchdown of the season when they made that switch to Caden Hauser. He followed that performance up with his second best yardage output with 117 yards and his second touchdown. So that was back-to-back games with 100-plus receiving yards and a touchdown. Now, he only had one reception, and it was early on in the game, but it went for a 50-yard touchdown here in Week 11. They've got Tulsa in Week 12. Tulsa has allowed at least 100 yards receiving and a touchdown to the opposing wide receiver in 6 of their last 7 games. The game that didn't make this criteria was Temple, which Landon Morris had 97 yards and no touchdown. So he came up, without a touchdown and 3 yards, but it was Temple. I like Chase Sewell against Tulsa here. Those are pretty convincing stats for me. And then Oran Singleton, Eastern Michigan, 9% owned, 15-plus points in 5 of his last 7, 19.2 and 19.7 in back-to-back weeks, 18 receptions and 200 yards in his last 2 games. Now, I'm not counting the Kent State game because Kent State's been Kent State. But Buffalo and Miami of Ohio had a receiver who went 5 for 75 in 1 and 5 for 84 in 1. I'm trying to remember who Eastern Michigan has this week. To help me out. But I forgot to write it down. Let's see here.
They play. It's oh man, we just talked about it. It's a game that we're looking forward to.
I'm
scrolling up,
through this. This is giving me
they play Ohio.
So sorry, great audio for our listeners. But so against Ohio's defense, they've allowed Buffalo and Miami of Ohio to have a receiver that goes 5 for 75 in a touchdown and 5 for 84 in a touchdown, minus Kent State here, who just got shut out. Honestly, Kent State has some pretty good wide receivers, but also having problems there at quarterback. So keeping them out. So if you want a guy who's going to get you probably about 5 and 70 to 90 yards, I think Singleton is an option. I don't love it, but it's an option.
All right. My 2 selections, I went with Adrian Norton from Akron, 16% owned, had another big game this past week, 29.8 points. He had 6 catches on 11 targets, 98 yards, and he caught 2 touchdowns. The touchdowns kind of aren't as reliable with Adrian Norton because of that 2 quarterback system, but he definitely gets targeted a lot. He's definitely the wide receiver 1 for the Zips. And then my second choice was Justin Lockhart, San Jose State, 13% owned. He's in a high volume passing attack. Obviously, he's second fiddle to Nick Nash, but that doesn't mean he doesn't produce, because he does. He's solid each and every week. Last week, he had 5 catches on 6 targets for 128 yards. I feel like that's kind of his stat line pretty much every week. 5, 6 catches, 90 to 100 yards, and maybe a touchdown or so every other week. And so teams key in on Nick Nash, they throw it deep to Justin Lockhart. So Lockhart and Norton, 2 receivers on the waiver wire that can help you in your playoff run.
All right, tight ends. Houston Thomas, UTSA, 0% owned, probably because he's coming off of his bye week. He's He had 6 targets and caught for 44 yards and 2 touchdowns in the week before the bye. All the reasons I talked about Owen McCown in this one, I want all of this 72.5 point over under. His last 2 games against Memphis and Tulsa, like I said, he had caught all 6 targets for 44 yards and 2 touchdowns. Before that, he had 10 targets, 6 receptions, 132 yards, no touchdowns, but back-to-back weeks of 19.2 and 22.4 points at your tight end spot. Give me all of that in a high over-under game.
For my choice of tight end, John Michael Gillenborg, Wyoming, 27% owned. It does look like they've been getting better quarterback play with Caden Anderson. He's definitely the top receiving option for that Wyoming offense or passing offense, and he's had 4+ targets each week. Not a one of the more reliable tight end options in a landscape where tight end options can sometimes be scarce. So John Michael Gillenborg, Wyoming.
That's going to do it for us. Come back and join us next week as we discuss what happened in week 12, as well as look forward to week 13. We give you our waiver wire guys to look for to help you out in week 13 of the 2024 season. As always, we bring you the up-to-date on the latest news and happenings in the world of G5 college football. Again, if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you're watching us on X, please give us a retweet, a like, and a follow. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please subscribe and leave those 5-star ratings and reviews. Thank you all for your support. And until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.